Nobody is ready for what just came out because the truth behind Cardi B's baby and those so-called DNA test results is way more complicated than anyone expected. For weeks, the internet has been running wild with one explosive claim that a DNA test had already been done. And it proved something shocking. People were saying the results were in. People were saying the truth was exposed. People were saying Offset had been right all along. But here's the problem. What actually came out of the courtroom tells a completely different story. And once you understand what really happened behind the scenes, everything changes. Because this didn't start with results. It started with a demand. A legal move that instantly turned a private situation into a public explosion. Offset didn't just question things quietly. He went to court and officially demanded a DNA test for the baby Cardi B had with Stefon Diggs. And the moment that filing surfaced, the internet lost control. Because suddenly, this wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a real case, real documents, real doubt. And that doubt spread faster than anyone could stop it. But then came the twist nobody saw coming. The court stepped in, and instead of confirming anything, instead of allowing the test that everyone was talking about, the judge said, no test for the newborn, no confirmation, no results, nothing. And just like that, the entire narrative should have ended. But it didn't, because instead of slowing down, the story got even bigger. Why? Because at the exact same time the court denied that test, another request was quietly approved. A second DNA test for another child, which instantly raised even more questions. Which child? Why that one? What was Offset really trying to prove? And before anyone could get clear answers, social media did what it always does. It filled in the blanks. Suddenly, viral posts started claiming Cardi went live, music crying, saying the test proved Offset was the father, and saying Stefon Diggs' music had left her. And people believed it. Millions of views, thousands of reactions, a story that sounded too crazy to be fake. But here's the reality. Nobody was ready to hear those results. They don't officially exist. No confirmed DNA test for the newborn. No verified proof. Just a situation that's spiraling out of control between courtrooms, relationships, and the internet itself. So now the real question is if there are no results. And why does it feel like everything just got exposed? Now, to really understand why this story has everyone confused, divided, and completely locked in, you have to go back way before the DNA test results started trending, way before the court documents leaked, and way before the internet turned this into one of the biggest celebrity controversies of the year. Because this didn't start with a baby. It didn't even start with Stefon Diggs. It started with a relationship that was never stable to begin with. We're talking about Cardi B and Offset. A relationship that from day one felt like a roller coaster nobody could get off. They secretly got married in 2017 before most people even realized how serious they were. And from that moment on, everything about them played out in public. Breakups, reconciliations, cheating allegations, public apologies, grand gestures. It was a cycle over and over again. One minute they were done, the next minute they were back together like nothing ever happened. And through all that chaos, they built a family. 3 kids together, Culture in 2018, Wave in 2021, and Blossom in 2024. So, from the outside, it looked like no matter how messy things got, they always found their way back music, until 2024. That's when everything changed because that's when Cardi filed for divorce again. And music this time, it felt different. It didn't feel like another temporary split. It felt final. She wasn't just stepping away emotionally. She was stepping away legally, seeking custody, moving forward and closing a chapter. But here's the problem with relationships like that. They don't end cleanly. Because when you've had years of on and off history, moments where you break up but still reconnect, and times where boundaries aren't clear, the timeline gets messy. And messy timelines. That's where stories like this are born. Because not long after that divorce filing, something new entered the picture. Stefon Diggs. At first, it was just rumours. Music spotted together, seen at events, and photos surfacing online. Then, it became more obvious. Public appearances, social media posts and interviews hinting at something real. By mid-2025, it wasn't speculation anymore. It was confirmed. Cardi had moved on, and not quietly either. This wasn't a rebound. This looked like a fresh start, a completely new chapter after years of chaos with Offset. And then came the moment that should have been simple but wasn't. In November 2025, when Cardi B gave birth to a baby boy, her fourth child, her first with Stefon Diggs. And for a brief moment, it looked like everything was finally settling. New relationship, new baby, new beginning. But that moment didn't last because almost immediately after the birth, everything changed. Screenshots started circulating online, music, allegedly showing Offset posting just 2 words, "My kid." That's it. 2 words and a laugh. And in a situation already this sensitive, that was enough to start a fire because instantly people started asking questions. Was he serious? Was he joking? Was he claiming something? Was there something about the timeline we didn't know? Music. And before anyone could confirm whether that post was even real, the narrative had already taken over. Because in today's world, you don't need proof of music. You just need a possibility, and once that possibility exists, the internet builds the rest. Cardi didn't stay quiet. She pushed back hard, calling out the rumours, telling people to stop, making it clear she wasn't going to entertain those kinds of accusations. At one point, even snapping at a reporter who brought it up, showing just how frustrated she was with the situation. But here's the thing. Shutting something down publicly doesn't mean it stops privately. Because while Cardi was dealing with the headlines, Offset was making moves behind the scenes, legal moves, and that's what changed everything. Because instead of responding online, instead of arguing through social media, he went to court, and he filed for a DNA test, not just for one child, but for 2. And once that information became public, the entire story shifted. Because now this wasn't just speculation anymore. This was a legal action, a real music request filed in an actual courtroom. And that adds a level of seriousness you can't ignore. But here's where things get even more complicated, because the court didn't just approve everything. They made a split decision. The request for the newborn, the baby Cardi had with Diggs, was denied. No test, no confirmation, no results, at least not officially. But at the same time, another DNA test request for a different child was approved, and that's where the confusion really started, because now people weren't just asking one question, they were asking many. Which child is being tested? Why that one? What is Offset actually trying to prove? And most importantly, why request a test at all if there was nothing there? And once those questions hit the internet, there was no stopping it because now the story wasn't just about a baby. It was about a timeline that didn't feel clear anymore. A relationship history that left room for doubt and a situation where no one had all the answers. Which brings us to the moment everything escalated. Because what happened next didn't just music add to the story, it made it impossible to ignore. This is where everything stops being confusing and starts becoming explosive, because the moment those court documents hit the public, the entire situation changed overnight. We're not talking about rumors anymore. We're not talking about screenshots floating around with no proof. We're talking about a real legal move made by Offset, a move that instantly raised one question louder than anything else. Why would he do this? Think about it carefully. This isn't some random person making wild claims. This is someone who spent years with Cardi B, someone who knows her timeline better than anyone else, someone who shares 3 children with her already. So when he steps into a courtroom and formally requests a DNA music test, that's not a joke. That's not social media drama. That's serious. And the moment people realized that, everything shifted because now the story wasn't what if. It became, what does Offset know that we don't? And that question alone was enough to send the internet into chaos. But here's where the first major twist hits. Because instead of confirming anything, instead of allowing that test to happen, the court stepped in and said, no DNA test for the newborn baby Cardi had with Stefan Diggs. No official confirmation, no results, nothing. And just like that, the narrative should have ended. Music, right? Wrong. Because instead of shutting the story down, that decision made it even bigger. Because now people weren't just asking about the baby, they were asking about the denial. Why deny it? What was the reason? Was it legal boundaries? Was it because that child isn't part of the divorce case? Or was it something else? And once those questions started, they didn't stop. But here's where things get even more complicated. Because while the newborn's test was denied, another request was quietly approved. A second DNA test for another child. Music. And that's where the confusion exploded. Because now the situation doesn't look simple anymore. Now it looks layered, calculated, and intentional. Music. Because think about it. Offset didn't just ask randomly. Music. He asked for 2 tests. One got blocked, one got approved, which means he wasn't just questioning one thing. He was questioning the entire timeline. And once that idea hit the public, everything started connecting in ways that made people uncomfortable because now the focus shifted from just the newborn, music, to the bigger picture, the relationship timeline, the breakup, and the reconciliation rumors. The possibility, whether real or not, that things weren't as clean as they seemed. And in a situation like this, that's all it takes. But here's the part that really pushed this into another level. That viral claim, the one that spread like wildfire, that Cardi allegedly went live, crying saying the DNA test proved Offset was the father and that Stefan Diggs had left her. That claim exploded. Millions of views, thousands of reactions. People are treating it like confirmed truth. But here's the reality. There is no verified evidence that ever happened, no confirmed life, no confirmed statement, and no confirmed result. And yet people believed it anyway. Because once a story reaches this level, facts music stop mattering. Narrative takes over. And right now, the narrative is chaos. But here's where things get even deeper. Because this situation isn't just about Cardi and Offset anymore. It's also about Stefan Diggs. And his situation was already complicated. Because while Cardi was pregnant, Diggs was dealing with his own paternity situation. Another child, another case, another DNA test. And that test came back confirming he was the father. So now you've got this situation where Diggs is a confirmed father in one case, but surrounded by questions in another. Offset is stepping in legally. Cardi is shutting things down publicly. And the internet is trying to connect everything into one story. That's not just messy. That's a perfect storm. And just like when it felt like that was enough, another layer hit. Because around the same time all of this was happening, Offset's life took a completely different turn. A violent one. He was shot, hospitalized, and in the middle of everything. And suddenly the story wasn't just about relationships anymore. It became about chaos on every level, personal, legal, and physical. And that added even more attention to everything else because now people weren't just watching for drama. They were watching for what happens next. Which leads to the first major twist nobody expected. Because despite everything, despite the divorce, the tension, and the court battle, Cardi reached out to Offset after the shooting and checked on him. And in that moment, it confused people even more because now the situation doesn't look like pure conflict anymore. Music. It looks complicated, emotional, and unfinished, which only adds more questions. Because if everything is truly over, why is music there still that connection? And if there's still that connection, what else don't we know? Which brings us to the moment where everything escalates even further. Because once the public fully got involved, this story stopped being controlled by facts and started being controlled by perception. And what people started believing next, that's what made the situation explode even more. Now, and just when it felt like this situation had already reached its peak, that's when everything spiraled music into something even bigger. Because now it wasn't just about court filings or rumors anymore. It became about everything happening at once, and the timing of it all made it impossible to ignore. Think about this music for a second. Right when the DNA test request becomes public, right when the court denies testing for the newborn, right when the internet is already in chaos, trying to figure out what's real and what's fake. Another major moment hits. Offset gets shot out of nowhere in a public place, in the middle of everything already falling apart. And instantly, the story shifts again. Because now this isn't just about relationships or paternity questions. And this is about a life that looks like it's music, unraveling from every direction at the same time. A messy divorce, a public DNA test request, rumors about paternity, and now a violent incident has landed him in the hospital. Even though the injury wasn't life-threatening, the impact was massive because suddenly everything felt heavier, more serious, and more intense. And the public, they couldn't look away. Because when multiple major events collide like this, people don't just see coincidence, they start looking for connections, even if those connections don't actually exist. But here's where things music take a turn. Nobody expected. Because while Offset is dealing with all of this chaos, Cardi B does something that completely changes the tone. She checks on him. Despite everything, despite the divorce, despite the legal battle, and despite the tension that's been building music for months, she still reaches out. And that moment, it caught people off guard because now this doesn't look like pure hatred or clean separation anymore. It looks complicated and emotional, like there's still something there that hasn't fully been resolved. And in a story already this messy, that only adds more layers. But at the same time, another part of the story is unfolding, Stefan Diggs. Because while all this is happening with Cardi and Offset, Diggs is out in public appearing at events, showing up at Card's shows, and sending a completely different message. A message that confuses everything even more. Because just weeks before, there were rumors that Cardi and Diggs had broken up, that things weren't stable, and that the relationship was already falling apart. But then, suddenly, they're seen together again. At concerts, music, at after-parties, leaving events minutes apart. And now people are asking, are they together or not? Is everything fine? Or is this just for appearances? Music. And when you combine that confusion with everything else going on, the situation becomes even more unpredictable because now you've got three different narratives happening at the same time. Offset in court, demanding answers. Cardi is trying to move forward but still tied to the past. Diggs in the middle dealing with his own controversies. And none of it, music, is clear. None of it is simple. None of it is resolved. Which is exactly why this story keeps growing. Because every time it feels like it might settle, something else happens. Something that adds another question. Add another layer, and another reason for people to stay locked in. But here's the shocking reveal that really flips everything. The DNA test results everyone has been talking about. They don't officially exist. There is no confirmed test for the newborn, no verified result, and no proof that Offset is the father of that child. The court denied that request. End of story, at least legally. And yet the internet kept running with it like it was real. Why? Because once a narrative takes over, facts don't slow it down. They get ignored. And that's exactly what happened here. Because the idea of shocking DNA results is way more powerful than the truth. That there are no results at all. And that's what makes this situation so dangerous. Because now, no matter what actually happened, that question music still exists, still floating around, still being debated, and still keeping the story alive. Which means this isn't just about what's real anymore. It's about what people believe is real. And that's something nobody in this situation can fully control. Which brings us to the moment where everything completely leaves their hands. Because once the public takes control of a story like this, it doesn't calm down. It escalates even further. And this music is where everything officially went completely out of control. Because the moment the words DNA test results started trending alongside Cardi B and Offset, the internet didn't just react. It exploded. We're talking millions of views within hours, posts going viral every second. People are arguing, debating, and picking sides without even knowing the full truth. And suddenly, this wasn't just a celebrity story anymore. This became a global conversation because everyone had something to say. On one side, you had people defending Cardi B hard, saying she's already been through enough, saying she moved on and is trying to build a new life, and saying dragging her baby into this is crossing a line. Comments started flooding everywhere. This is her child. Why is this even being questioned? People need to respect her privacy. You all are doing too much for clicks. And those voices, they got loud because to them, this isn't just drama. It's disrespect. It's about protecting a mother and her child from public speculation. But on the other side, the energy was completely different because there were people who saw this as something deeper in people asking, if there's nothing there, why did Offset go to court? Why request music 2 DNA tests? This doesn't come out of nowhere. And that's where the real division started, because now it's not just about defending or attacking music. It's about what people believe is the truth. And once belief enters the conversation, facts don't matter as much anymore. Because now you've got fans acting like investigators, breaking down timelines, looking at dates, comparing when Cardi and Offset were together, when she moved on with Stefan Diggs, when the baby was born. Trying music to find any overlap that could explain why this situation even exists. And that's what keeps the story alive. Because the more people dig, the more theories come out. But here's where things hit another level. The industry. Because when a story like this gets this big, it doesn't stay within fans. It reaches people inside the culture. Artists, influencers, commentators. And even when they don't speak directly, music, you can feel it. Subtle posts, indirect comments, reactions, music that don't name names, but clearly relate to the situation. One post goes, social media turns rumors into reality before facts, even music, come out. Another people believe what sounds the most dramatic. And that right there, that's the shift. Because now people aren't just reacting, they're questioning the entire system, how stories spread, how narratives are built, how quickly things get out of control. But here's what makes this even more intense: the silence. Because despite everything happening, despite the headlines, the rumors, the viral claims, neither Cardi nor Offset has come out with a clear, direct statement, music, explaining everything. And that silence, it's not helping. It's making things worse because now people are filling in the blanks themselves. And when that happens, the story becomes whatever the loudest voices say it is, which is exactly what we're seeing right now. Some people believe Cardi is completely innocent. Some believe Offset knows something we don't. Some think this is all exaggerated. And some think this is just the beginning of something bigger. And all of those opinions, they're happening at the same time, which music creates chaos because there's no single version of the story anymore. Just multiple narratives all competing for attention. And that's what keeps the situation alive, because every new post, every new reaction, every new theory adds fuel to the fire. But here's the part that really changes everything. This story isn't slowing down, it's building. Because every time something new comes out, even something small, it resets the entire conversation. And right now, people are watching closely for the next move from Cardi, from Offset, from Diggs, from the courts. because whatever happens next could completely change the narrative again. Which brings us to the final music twist, the part that could flip everything one more time. And just when it feels like you've heard every version of this story, every rumor, every shocking reveal, this is where everything flips one last time, because the real twist isn't what people think happened, it's what actually didn't happen. Think about it. The entire internet has been screaming about DNA test results. People acting like the truth already came out, like everything was confirmed. But when you strip all the noise away, when you go back to the actual facts, there's one detail that changes everything. The DNA test for the newborn baby, the one everyone is talking about, never happened. The court said no. No test, no results, no confirmation, nothing. And yet, it still feels like something was exposed. Why? Because the damage wasn't done by results. It was done by the question itself. Because the moment Offset went into court and requested that DNA test, he introduced doubt into the situation, public doubt. And once that doubt exists, you can't erase it. Because now, no matter what happens, that question is always there. Why did music, he ask? What did he think he knew? Was there something about the timeline we don't fully understand? And that's what keeps this story alive. But here's where things get even deeper. Because when you step back and look at everything happening at once, it doesn't feel like random events anymore. It feels like a chain reaction. The divorce between Cardi B and Offset, the new relationship with Stefan Diggs, the baby, the rumors, the court filing, the denied test, the viral claims, the public chaos. All of it happening in such a short period of time. And when that happens, people start looking for meaning, for connections, for something bigger behind it all, even if there isn't one. But here's the part that really changes everything. This situation is still open. Nothing is fully resolved. The divorce, still ongoing. Music. The custody situation, still being decided. The second DNA test that was approved, no public results yet. And the biggest music question of all, still unanswered. Because even though the newborn's test was denied, even though there are no confirmed results, the conversation didn't end. It evolved. Because now it's not just about whether a test was done, it's about why it was requested in the first place. And what that says about everything that came before it. Which means this story isn't over. Not even close. Because all it takes is one new detail, one confirmed update, one moment where someone breaks silence and everything could change again completely. Which is why people aren't looking away. They're watching, waiting, refreshing timelines, looking for the next piece of information. And because they know something else is coming. And when it does, it won't just add to the story, it could completely redefine it. So now the real question is, was this DNA test situation just a moment of doubt? Or was it the beginning of something much bigger? Because if it's the second one, then what we've seen so far, that's just the surface. And the real story hasn't even started yet. Now, I want to hear from you, because this is one of those situations where everyone has a different opinion, and honestly, there's still no clear answer. Do you think Offset had a valid reason to request that DNA test? Or do you think this whole situation was unnecessary and just made everything worse? And what about Cardi B? Do you think she's being unfairly dragged into something that should have stayed private? Or do you think there's more going on behind the scenes than we actually know? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. I'm reading everything. And don't hold back, because the more people speak on this, the bigger this conversation gets. Also, if you made it this far, make sure you like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications, because if anything new drops. And trust me, with a situation like this, something always does. You don't want to miss it. And here's the final question I'll leave you with. If the truth really comes out, do you think it will clear everything up or make this situation even more explosive? Let me know below, because something tells me this story is far from